I hereby call to order this meeting of the King George County Board of Supervisors. Mr. Miller, are there any amendments to the agenda, sir?
No, ma'am.
Very good. I'll now open the floor for public comment. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person in order to afford everyone an opportunity to speak. If comments relate to a specific public hearing item, we ask that you offer those comments at the time of the public hearing. And we do have 2 public hearings this evening. So let me go ahead and open the floor. I have one person who signed up in advance for public comment, Mr. Wayne Bushrod.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. My name is Wayne Bushrod, 10144 Deer Lane. We wanted to come before you this evening to express our sincere gratitude for your majority vote to remove the Confederate monument from the front side of our county courthouse. Thank you for your persistence and commitment to realizing a solution to remove this atrocious reminder of an unjust, prejudiced, and discriminating period in the history of the United States. By removing this appalling reminder of no justice for the 22% of this county from public view, people of color and other minority citizens entering the courthouse will not see monuments and statues in remembrance of the way their ancestors were treated, and perhaps gain a sense of assurance that their judicial case will be acted upon impartially and justly. As these types of displays are everywhere and constantly in our face, people of color do not view them as history or something we need to learn from or appreciate. We view these type of displays as another catalyst to devalue particular races and cultures. Thank you again for looking in from outside the box, for seeing and realizing the way people of color view this type of negative display and portrayal of those horrific times their forefathers and relatives were forced to endure. We all know that it happened. Let us move onward cooperatively as better people. This simple act of voting to remove this monument renews my opinion, where I can once again hold the standards of King George County a little higher than that of our neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So I don't have anyone else on the sign-in sheet. However, I will open it up to anyone else here in the boardroom, physically present, who wishes to provide public comment. Ms. Lavelle?
My name is Ana Maria Lobel. I live in Presidential Lakes. I want to thank the supervisors for the service to the community. I want to say the people of King George very upset and worry about the real estate assessments. For some people, it's very hard right now to pay these bills. On the top of that, if you don't pay taxes in time in the county, they had to charge the finance 10%. And also I want to ask Mrs. Hart how she went find these people. And instead of hire people from Virginia, she hired people from Maryland. I think I hear that, but I'm not sure. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else here in the boardroom wishing to provide public comment? All right, then I'll move on. Mr. Dines, do we have anyone online who wishes to provide public comment? Thank you. Members, did anyone receive correspondence? No? All right, I will now close public comment and we will open it up to reports of members of the board. Mr. Granger, would you like to start, sir?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. I'd like to say thank you to Mr. Bushrod. Thank you for coming and providing your comments upon the memorial and the plans to move it. Ms. Lavelle, it's always a pleasure to have you here as well. And so thank you for coming and commenting. I'll just reiterate the same point. The assessments are different than the tax rate. And so we will be entertaining the tax rate as the new fiscal year comes up, which would be for the June timeframe. So we'll start that process in February, March timeframe. Other than that, I would like to make a greeting to Mr. Sisson, who is here in a different capacity tonight than what he spent a majority of his time in this room for. He served for 12 years the citizens of King George County on this Board of Supervisors. So welcome and look forward to hearing from you as your role as the Technical Director of NSWCDD. So welcome tonight, sir. Other than that, I'd just like to say thank you to the Historical Society, Mr. Clark and staff, and the school the King George School Bands for the production they put on this past weekend on the 5th for the tree lighting ceremony. It was a really great opportunity to get out. It was nice that we were able to congregate, unlike last year where it was a little more subdued. So really great turnout. Thank you to all those who did come out. It was a fun time, and we'll continue to do it year and year, and hopefully we'll continue to get a larger turnout. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Granger. Mr. Stonehill.
Good evening, everyone. Mr. Bushrod, thank you for coming out. Certainly appreciate you coming out and all the work that your staff and folks did to help with this project. So thanks again. Ms. Lavelle, we're all in the same boat with the tax assessment. We're all shocked as well as you were. So we're working on it. If you stick around, I guess Ms. Hart will have some answers for you, for all of us later on when she speaks. So just we'll see what happens. And I just wanted to say thank you very much to everybody that was involved with this Sunday's production of the tree lighting ceremony. It was a beautiful night. It was a great attendance. It was better than year before last, I think. Last year, obviously, was very quiet, but I just wanted to reiterate, thank you very much. Great show, and looking forward to it next year. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Stonehill. Ms. Bender.
Yes, thank you very much. I attended our Healthy Generations, which is the Rappahannock Area Agency on Aging meeting, the Dahlgren Heritage Museum meeting, where they're continuing moving on with their virtual museum presence. I also attended the tree lighting with most of my colleagues. It was a very nice event. I would like to thank the King George Historical Society, Chris Clark and his Parks and Rec staff, the bands from the schools, and the county general property staff. And for the bands from the school, I want a shout out to Mr. Cheatham and his two other fellow teachers in the King George Middle School band. They very nicely gave me permission to come to the rehearsal yesterday so I could see my daughter who's in the sixth grade band. They're performing now and I'm here in the boardroom. So it was very nice, but I just wanted to talk about how good these band teachers were to take children who mostly learn, especially the sixth graders, virtually play their instruments. And now they got them together in 3 months and be able to do a band concert. It was very nice. And it was very nice to see the children playing their instruments, and they were very happy to be able to perform. And I'm sure they're having a very good performance now. So I just wanted to give a shout out to them and say thank you for what you do with your band program. I also got a lovely tour with Mr. David Beal, who's in our audience, and Dennis Maxey, who's the maintenance operations manager. And they took me to some concerns on Millbank Road and pointed out a lot of things. And I'm going to be speaking to the constituents who had addressed the concerns. But it's about some water issues on that road. And it was a great tour. And I really thank them for giving me an hour and a half of their time to explain the issues on that road. So don't always be mad at VDOT. They do good work. And the only other thing I wanted to mention is I've spent the last couple of days researching groundwater withdrawal and aquifer and raw water and wastewater issues, which, as some people know, with our service authority. So it's a little boring, but it's very interesting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Bender. Mr. Bush.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So thank you to everyone who came out this evening. I'd like to start off with pointing out today is December 7th. 80 years ago, this nation was attacked by the Empire of Japan in the beginning of our involvement in World War II. So with that, we should never forget, even though it was 80 years ago, so to those who have fallen, fair winds and following seas. Last evening, my counterpart on the school board participated in his last school board meeting. So I would like to thank T.C. Collins for his 8 years of service on the King George County School Board and his smooth transition to this seat on January 1. Madam Chair, I received correspondence with something that we have been working on with Fairview Beach regarding the golf cart ordinance. So members of the Fairview Beach Residents Association made a red line with suggestions on our ordinance. I'd like to point out to my colleagues, the golf cart ordinance is separate from the subdivision and zoning ordinance. So what I would like to get consensus from this board is to have the county attorney do a review of this red line and then forward it on appropriately. However that process may be, Madam Chair, if we would have to vote on it after her review. But I would eventually like this to go before the Planning Commission for the Planning Commission to take action on the zoning or on the golf cart ordinance.
So the will of the board, does anyone have a problem with us forwarding it to Ms. Lackey for her to review their red line and then bring it back to us, and then we will direct it to the Planning Commission? Does that work for everyone,
Yes, ma'am.
that process? Yes? Yes? Okay.
Thank you. And then assessments were brought up this evening. So assessments, even though it was sticker shock basically to most people, it's part of a process, and the process is very thorough. It's methodical in nature. So it has nothing to do with the tax rate. The future board, after January 1st, when they get into budget, will be looking at that and see what their next steps are as far as equalizing the tax rate possibly, or other measures that may come up. But nothing is set in stone, and Ms. Hart might be able to provide some clarity to that process this evening. Finally, I'd like to leave you with, I know I've had some constituents reach out to me. They've noticed that I was absent from a board meeting, and I haven't been as active in the community as I previously had been. So I'd like to thank those constituents for their thoughts and prayers. I had some medical issues, but I am happy to say, by the blessing of God, I am cancer-free. So thank you very much, Madam Chair. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Bush, and we're all glad to hear that. All right then, Ms. Lovell, thank you very much for coming out. And as my colleagues stated, I believe we will get some more answers to our constituents' questions from Commissioner Hart in a little bit. So thank you for bringing your question forward. I want to thank Mr. Bushrod for coming out. Thank you for your remarks. So I've been informed by a citizen last night that funds have been pledged by private individuals to commit to covering the contract costs of relocation of the Confederate Memorial to avoid taxpayer expense. I want to thank the citizen who organized this effort and those who have opted to assist in this effort. Thank you very much. I want to thank our first responders. They had an extremely busy weekend this weekend, Friday night and Saturday night. We had some major incidents in the county. So I thank them for always putting the safety of others before their own. Monday, November 29th, I attended the redistricting committee map drawing meeting, and we drew up some suggested maps. We're going to meet again next week to finalize. And then staff will be here on December 21st at our next meeting to present some options to the board to take a look at. And then we'll also do a public workshop to share them with the public, and then ultimately a public hearing. Wednesday, December 1st, I attended the Department of Social Services Administrative Board Retreat. I want to thank Mr. Jonathan Franklin here this evening for organizing it. And at this time, I would like to recognize Mr. Franklin for his service with a member commendation for his outstanding service to our community in his role as director of our Department of Social Services. So I have, this has been distributed to all members last Friday in advance. I'm going to read it now and ask perhaps Mr. Bush, you'd like to move to approve it since you previously served on the board that actually appointed Mr. Franklin to his position. Commendation of Mr. Jonathan Franklin, Director, King George Department of Social Services. Whereas the mission of the King George Department of Social Services is to provide for and enhance the quality of life for the residents of the county through locally administered programs designed to support the economic and social self-sufficiency of families and to safeguard vulnerable children, the disabled, and our elderly residents. And whereas the Department of Social Services' primary functions are administering benefit programs, including medical, food, utility, childcare, and temporary assistance, and providing family services, including child and adult protective services, foster care and adoption, children's services, and adult services. And whereas the Director of Social Services' primary responsibilities include leadership of the department through effective communication, formulating the strategic direction, conducting sound financial management, administering the program of financial assistance, ensuring proper supervision to children in agency custody, service as executive officer to the administrative board, and fostering community collaboration with other agencies. And whereas, since his appointment in October 2020, Mr. Franklin has identified the need for a vision and strategic plan, increased retention and recruited high-performing employees, empowered them to assume challenging management opportunities, exercised sound financial stewardship, worked with county financial staff to understand the intricacies of the DSS budget, and exceeded expectations set by state and federal governments. Now, therefore, we hereby recognize the exceptional service of Mr. Jonathan Franklin, Director of the Department of Social Services, to our community and staff by presentation of this commendation.
I move to approve the resolution as presented.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion carries. Mr. Franklin, would you please come forward? And also, I'd like to recognize my colleagues on the DSS Administrative Board are also here this evening. Mr. Frank Franzo, Mrs. Renee Parker, and Ms. Kristen Outlaw. And so if you all want to come forward for the picture as well. And Mr. Bush, would you join us since you actually... Come on up.
Outside of the way.
All right, then let me finish up here. Thursday, December 2nd, attended the NSWC Dahlgren Division Tour hosted by newly appointed Technical Director, Mr. Dale Sisson, who will be providing us with a brief presentation later on in the meeting. And that evening attended the Dahlgren Christmas tree lighting event. Saturday, December 4th, there was a ribbon cutting grand opening of Eric O'Neill, Edward Jones Financial Services. I want to thank Economic Development staff for coordinating this event, and congratulations to Mr. O'Neill. Sunday, December 5th, also attended the county Christmas tree lighting. It was a well-attended event. I want to thank Chris Clark, Director of Parks and Recreation, for your coordination of this event, and as well all of the organizations that contributed to it. I want to thank the Department of General Properties for decorating the tree and for hanging the snowflakes and wreaths on the light poles. It was pointed out to me that at least 3 of them don't light at all anymore, and several poles are missing them altogether. So I wanted to bring this to my colleagues' attention and see if anyone would be interested in having staff investigate the cost of ordering replacements in time for next year, and whether or not tourism funding could be used to support the purchase. Is that all right with everyone to? So all of these light poles here have the snowflake, either a snowflake or a wreath with a candle in it that light up. And at least 3 of them don't light up at all anymore. So they just put them up because they look nice during the day. But yeah, so right, just this strip here. Yeah, he said he's rigged them and rewired them as many ways and times as he possibly can. And he just can't, there isn't any more he can do for them. Thank you. And Friday, December 10th, I want to let my colleagues know the King George Family YMCA is hosting a dodgeball tournament from 6 to 9 p.m. And it's my understanding that county administrative staff is planning to field a team, and I wanted to make the board aware they can contact Mr. Minor by tomorrow morning if they would like to be one of the 10 players on the team. And that's all I have for my report. All right, with that, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion carries. All right, county officials' reports. Ms. Judy Hart, Commissioner of the Revenue, welcome, ma'am.
Forgot my glasses. Hold on. Good evening and Merry Christmas. Board members, Mr. Miller, Mrs. Lackey. I want to come to you tonight to give you just a couple updates on some questions that were brought to my attention the last time I was here. One of them was about the contractor shall visit each parcel of land and make complete physical inspection. And did I know if this was done or not? And I have spoken with Mr. Chastain closely the last couple of weeks about some of these. And he says that yes, modern solution is using a drone. It is capable to measure buildings unless it is a no-fly zone. In that case, it's boots on the ground and they take pictures with cameras. Then when he went through the appeals, when the taxpayers were contacting him, he said every appeal that he was discussing, he had pictures to support those appeals. And with wonderful help from Chris Dines today, our IT man, he's the man, he was able to download all of our pictures. So we had those today to play with and look at. So we have all those pictures of all the properties. How do we know if the company completed with the work format, which the contractor shall designate photographs, each main building, including dwellings, a minimum of 2 photographs shall be taken front, rear, and main of buildings. And again, we have those pictures now. They have to be downloaded into the counts, but yes, they have taken pictures of every structure. We have the file. He has taken over 40,000 pictures. And in our system, we have a little over 9,000 improved structures. So we've got a lot of pictures. It's kind of like your photo album at home. Contractor shall keep a record of each visit on the property card to include dates, times, name of appraiser, persons interviewed. So will I be getting that information? Yes, I have that information. I received an Excel spreadsheet with every property on it. They have been initialed, they've been dated, they have been marked where any changes need to be made. We have the field sheets when they have indicated any changes that need to be made. And the file has the 2018 file with no changes and the 2022 file with changes. And we can look those up for the taxpayers. Another question that I had was about the letter that everyone received first go round that had the property assessment on it. This one here that had the to be determined for the tax rate, and then it had a total tax figure due. Let's see, there is a reason that the mailing went out. and it said 22 proposed assessment in the left-hand column. Then it had a record number. Underneath it, it had values, and then a use class, and then the district. So all of that is in the top regarding 2022. And I get that. This was Madam Chair speaking, asking the question, post 22, but there was a whole other box underneath the field that said percent levy information, and that was this box right here. Can you report what the percent levy, how can you report it? Because there was no tax rate had not been set yet. So you can report the percent levy was for 2020 and 2021 because the Board of Supervisors did not assess tax rate. Because of that, the Code of Virginia 58.1-3330 states that that notice of change must be listed right here in that, pardon me, and it says in part, the total amount of new tax levy based on the current tax rate at the time the notices are prepared, and the amount of the total tax levy for the immediately prior to tax years. So that is something that the company Right Minds had to post on there for that letter. Another question that I had brought to me was, and this again was Madam Chair speaking, and if I could maybe in the future work together so that if you have anything that is going to be mailed out, send it to the board and say, this is what it's going to look like. Do we see any issues with this? Because I would have looked at this, meaning this letter right here, and said, no, thank you. We do not know that why it had to be mailed out until we got our own in the mailbox. We didn't know it was going to be mailed out. So if we could work together in the future to try to have a little more communication as far as what it's going to look like, I would greatly appreciate it. And I responded, sure, I can get the company to do that. Stephen Chastain had to mail out a second notice, he called it, and it was to the taxpayers that came to him with issues about their property that he discussed with them before the deadline. And we talked, he asked if he should send it to the board. And I remembered that Madam Chair would like to see those. And he sent it to the board. He sent the copy of the letter to the board and asked if the board wanted to review it before he sent it out. And it was referred to, thank you for sending the information to us. Please work through Commissioner Hart if you have any requests of the board. And then in the contract states 1.6, special terms and condition that the extent and character of the work to be accomplished by the contractor shall be subject to the general control and approval of the Commissioner of the Revenue. So, you all got a copy of it because he felt that, that's what you wanted to see. So that's all that I have, unless any of you all have any further questions for me about this.
Questions from members?
I don't have any questions. I'd just like to say, Ms. Hart, thank you for coming out. I appreciate you running it around, the answers to those questions. Really appreciate you doing that and getting back to us. So thank you so much. And I know this is, it's every 4 years and it can be a bit stressful, especially when we have a situation like this where there's a significant change. Yeah. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. We've had a lot of calls, a lot of emails, a lot of concerned citizens, and we've, I think, talked them off the ledge. They're doing good. We've given them all the information that's requested, and if they want more, they've been contacting us, and we can, provide as much as we can for them. And as of today, I have 67 folks that want to attend the Board of Equalization meetings. And it may grow a few more because that I'm sure will be the first of the year. So I think that's pretty much all I have, unless there's anything else.
Thank you. Mr. Stonehill?
Thank you, Mrs. Hart, for coming out. I just had a couple questions. So folks, they talked to me that they had called and left messages on that. They followed the directions that were on the back of the form. They never heard back from anybody. They can call your office and get copies of the field notes, correct?
Yes, yes.
Can they just come up there? Can they
Yeah,
get
they
you on
can
the
come
phone?
by.
Or just, all right, do they need to make an appointment or anything to come on up there?
No, just come on in.
Okay. And a report to you was supplied, about how many inspections and all that stuff that this company had done, X amount?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes,
And you have that there?
yes,
And all the photographs are there in those field reports, right?
yes. I have everything, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Bender.
Yes, I want to thank you and your staff. I went in there several times to ask questions for constituents and then called them back, and I appreciate you and your staff's willingness to answer. And the constituents didn't, some of them wanted the answer right away and weren't happy they had to wait till next year, but they did appreciate the help and feedback. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Bush.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Judy, thank you for coming out tonight.
Sure.
I just have one question. So you spoke about the drone pictures. Was this just an aerial view, or did they lower the drone and take pictures of the facade? Like, are they very thorough, or is it just aerial views of the size and scope of the various structures on property?
I have looked at our aerial, if this is the house, it's aerial looking down and you can see the front, and then there's an aerial from this way and you can see the back. The few that I looked at today, like I say, I got the file later in the day, but I plan to look at more of the pictures, if not all of them, and see how close, because several of them have many pictures. And I feel that we can pick and choose what goes in the account. So we'll pick the clearest, best picture to go in the accounts.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Hart, for coming out this evening and answering the questions that we posed to you last month. We appreciate you following up with the assessor regarding them. I have previously shared all of the emails that I received from the assessor, and I will note, ma'am, I requested the assessor work through you because those were the terms of his contract. It's not our job to directly supervise him, so I wanted him to work through you to fulfill our questions.
Okay.
So I do still have a few questions. The first, piggybacking on what Mr. Bush asked about the drone photographs. So do we know, did he obtain permission to use that equipment if there were areas that were close to our military facilities?
That's the area, one area that I know of that was no fly.
Okay.
And he did not use the drone.
So someone would have done a physical in-person inspection at
they went-
any of those locations?
That's what he did, yes.
Okay. So then that makes me wonder then, did certain properties in the first look get a more thorough look in person than other properties did because of the use of the drone?
I wouldn't think so, because it would be like any other assessor that we have used in the past that took pictures, and they did the same. They take pictures of the outbuildings, the separate garages, the houses front and back. I guess with the drone, you just get that aerial view of those buildings.
Right. And then another question that was brought to me this week. So in some cases, I have heard from citizens who did file an appeal with the assessor, and then it sounds as though they did get a closer look beyond the drone flyover, and someone went to do a second assessment in response to the appeal, and actually received higher reassessments in the second mailing. Are you aware of that?
I have heard that, yes, ma'am.
So then,
The folks that I know of are going before the Board of Equalization about it. Yes.
all right. And so then that again, to me, is concerning because it sounds like perhaps the process wasn't as fair to every property owner.
Yeah.
is sort of how I'm looking at it. And I know that's how they're looking at it because they've let me know.
It's very disheartening to know that. I will say I did ask Mr. Chastain to be on phone, and he did not feel comfortable discussing contents of the contract in an open meeting. So he.
Thank you for letting us know that. Let me ask one more question, Mr. Bush. And so then in looking at the code section, 58.1-3331, public disclosure of certain assessment records, there's a section that I believe one of our taxpayers had brought to your attention or made a request under this code section. It states, upon request of a taxpayer or his duly authorized representative whose property has been assessed for taxation, the assessing officer shall provide a written explanation or justification for an increase in the property's assessed value.
That could be the worksheets that we have at the office, the file. So I would have to go through there and find that person's and provide it to him.
So
Are you?
are you saying is it your position then that property card is the written explanation or justification for an increase in the property's assessed value?
I would assume so, that or the letter that he sent them. But the property card would show what changes he made.
Can you find out the answer to that question for us, please? Because I suspect that we're going to have lots of folks revisit that because further in that code section, it deals with making the same request at the Board of Equalization level as well. So I just feel like we have some folks who know about this because they shared it with me and they feel like they haven't gotten the proper justification, whether that comes from your office or from the assessor directly.
Okay.
So if you wouldn't mind checking on that, I would appreciate it.
I will.
Okay. And Mr. Bush, you had something you wanted to add?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So some things just came out that I just wanted to expand upon. So increased assessments is also something that folks run into jeopardy of when you go before the Equalization Board. So when you're doing an assessment of an entire county, it's done, at a thorough level, but not in so much detail as if you go out for a singular property. And some things could be found. So you always do run that chance of the assessment coming up. Same thing to be said of the Board of Equalization. When you go before the Board of Equalization, they open it back up, they look at it. I mean, I know there was a case last assessments where a gentleman's top floor was not assessed over a period of like 20 years, and then he gets a big bump because some things were discovered that weren't previously assessed. So it's just something that to be cautious of, or not cautious, but be aware of when you go through this process. It's not retribution or anything of that nature. It's just that a more thorough look is being taken. And when you go through something more thoroughly, chances are you could find something else, either that could negatively impact that assessment, or in some cases can drive that assessment up. So I just wanted to bring that to awareness. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I agree. And we have always encouraged taxpayers to get their assessment cards from us to see what the county has listed for them. Because virtually something could be wrong. It could be just a typo, slip of the finger. It could have been on the building permit, perhaps, and then the builder or the homeowner decided, okay, no, I don't want that, but it still was on the building permit. We still got the information, but it was changed in process, so there's all kinds of scenarios. So I encourage the taxpayer, we encourage them to go to DMV and get their vehicle straight. They need to watch their real estate card and make sure their house and what we have listed for their house is correct for tax purposes.
All right. Anyone? I know, Ms. Bender, you had something to add. Go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to jump in on that. I was one of those people who went to look for the field cart, and they did
Example.
fix it. I did not have that fireplace or the outdoor kitchen. But that's one thing that if you need to notice, because it was on my previous tax assessment and I never caught it because I didn't know about the field sheet. But that field sheet is very important because there might be things on there.
Yeah, and we've changed them over the years many times for folks for whatever reason, or have an assessor come when they do new construction. And we'd send them out to look at so-and-so's house that said they got 3 floors and we've got them for 4 or whatever, you know. But it's a good idea.
All right, if that is all, thank you very much, Commissioner Hart, for following up and joining us again this evening. Thank you for your time.
I'll end on this note. The cigarette revenue collected so far is $1,226,117.
Thank you for that information. All right, moving on. Sheriff Giles, welcome, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, members of the board and Madam Chair. I had the opportunity to listen to your last board meeting on November 23rd. During that board meeting, the county administrator, in the county administrator's report, he, at my request, asked for a date for a work session to discuss the financing for the upgrade of our public radio system. Supervisor Bush recommended to hold the work session off until Supervisor-elect Collins could take a seat, which will be after the first of the year. Members of the board, I'm asking that you reconsider that thought. I'm asking to have the work session one evening next week. By waiting until next month to have the work session, it pushes the whole project off by at least 2 months. The turnaround for upgrading a system such as what we are proposing is roughly 1 to 2 years. There is engineering of additional tower sites for radio coverage and other back office requirements to look at before the radio system can even be built. I realize that this is a 2022, 2023 capital improvements, but the longer we wait to figure out financing, the more costly the system we have now becomes. Most of the equipment we have is not being covered by any maintenance agreement. Therefore, finding parts to repair is at cost, not to mention the parts, if they can be found, will be refurbished at best. If the only reason to wait is until Supervisor-elect Collins is sitting on the board, then I ask you to allow him to be part of this work session and provide any input or questions. Please reconsider holding the work session next month and schedule it for one evening next week. So thank you always for your support, and I appreciate your consideration in this request.
Thank you, Sheriff Giles. So what is the pleasure of the board with regard to Sheriff Giles' request?
I'm amenable to holding it next week, absolutely.
All right, Mr. Stonehill, Ms. Bender?
My question is, Mr. Miller, I had requested more information from our financial, because this is a high price tag item. And would they be able to provide that information?
So we talked about this at the CIP, that this is one of those projects along with the preschool for the school board and fire station, the additional fire station, that these are going to require kind of a bigger picture financial situation. I have had conversations with our representative from Davenport, Mr. Lau, and he indicated that if the board is interested in, making a decision about the radio system now, as opposed to, a process of looking at everything, we are capable of doing that. I think that, I don't know that is required for you to entertain more information from the Motorola folks and from Sheriff Giles. I don't know that it would be our preference that if you do something, you do a big package of restructuring a lot of things and maybe looking at a bigger debt, tie it to this issue of the reassessment. What are you going to do as part of your budget? But if it is something that is the board's decision that we need to make a decision on the public radio system, we certainly could pull that out of the longer term projects and have a discussion. So we're prepared either way.
Because I have a lot of questions. I understand how important this is. I mean, my dad used to do and work with emergency management for radio systems, so I do understand it. But my concern is the high ticket price, and if you can bundle it with other bonds that we need to do, and more information in that than just entering in an agreement with one supplier.
I think that that's something that we would want to have the sheriff and the the folks from Motorola maybe give you a little bit fuller detail presentation. Our one look at this is you could have a singular relationship with them, or you could, for the financing for the actual project. I understand that, our current system is based on Motorola, so any kind of a marriage is going to be very difficult if you were to come up with another provider, correct? And almost impossible. And so if the sheriff, if fire and rescue has really become very dependent on the Motorola system, then you're probably best to go down that avenue. However, do you open it up to other Motorola providers? I don't know anything about this current one. They obviously are very capable, but that would be one element that you might have to consider, is that you've got to put something out to bid. The other thing is the financing can be done in different ways. You could do it with doing a rate, request for rate terms from banks. You could ask the Motorola folks to provide a financing package. So there's a myriad of things that have to be explored. So I do believe the sheriff is right. There does need to be a fuller discussion on this. And I think you all had indicated you wanted to have that back when we were talking about the CIP. So the timing of it, I think, is something that the sheriff is, right, that we need to not push this farther into the next fiscal year, because then you're going to just delay it any further.
Well, I don't mind having the work session. I just would like somebody available to answer all those questions, because I'll have a lot of financial questions. And so could they be able to do it in less than a week turnaround?
So let me ask a question that might help answer. Let's ask the sheriff what he's really looking for out of this work session, because there's absolutely the intention to have Davenport come next month to give us the options and the bigger package. But I think what you're asking for, Sheriff, correct me if I'm wrong, you're looking for a work session. You're not looking for, you just want to provide us with some more information about the opportunity, and you are not going to be looking for a board vote next week, right?
Correct.
And we're clear on that.
Yes, ma'am. I'm just looking for a work session where the finances can be discussed and possibly a decision on what avenue to recommend to the board for the board's vote, either at your next meeting or even the 1st of January, if we're going to wait on that. But I just want to move forward, because the longer we wait, obviously, the worse the system gets.
Sure. So, but I think for comfort level, I just want to be clear, work session, you're giving us information. There's not an expectation that we're going to vote on this next week, or frankly, even at the December 21st meeting.
Correct.
Because I think all of us have similar questions that Ms. Bender has expressed with regard to financing both this project and many other future capital projects.
That's
so,
correct.
So you're okay with this work session? This is a work session. This is a Q&A. This is not board action.
That's correct. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
That's my
Does that
understanding.
help, Ms. Bender?
Yes.
All right. Mr. Bush, sorry to interrupt, but I kind of felt like that would help.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Sheriff, thank you for coming out tonight, and I can understand your passion and push to try and get this done. I absolutely can understand that. However, to my colleagues, I personally would take issue with having a meeting with Mr. Collins and I at the same table. I'm supervisor of the James Road District till midnight, 31 December. I could appreciate Mr. Collins being able to do his homework and be prepared for when he's supervisor. I'm not willing to entertain any questions from Mr. Collins in a proceeding of this Board of Supervisors when he is not a supervisor. Along with that, we were talking about the debt. I understand timeline, and if it pushes it back a month or 2 months or even 3 months on something that's a 2-year process, I think we should go through this methodically and look at what our financial options are. I understand Motorola, but they're salesmen. They're looking to lock things in. I think we need to take a methodical look based on the numbers Ms. Hart gave us tonight on our cigarette tax. The county's already looking at a $1 million shortfall on the $4 million that we levied against the budget, predicting what we would bring in as far as cigarette tax revenues. So I think we should take our time. I understand it's a big project and we want to get things locked in, but I think right now we just need to be methodical and thorough in this process. That's my opinion. Of course, I will defer to the will of the board. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Can I speak on one?
Go ahead, Sheriff.
For clarification, I'm not pushing Motorola for finances. I'm looking for finances to fund a radio system. It's not Motorola financing that I'm pushing. They are a venue or somebody we can use and somebody that has offered us an avenue, but I'm not pushing Motorola. I'm looking for finance to get this thing off the ground and start moving. If you decide to use another financial institute that we can give that money to Motorola to pay for the system and move forward, that's what I'm looking for, is because it's going to take turnkey a year to 2 years to get the radio system up and running. It's not going to take, 2 years to even start the process. If we can get that process started, whether it's another financial institute or not, I could care less. I'm just looking for some headway so we know which direction we're going to go financially wise. I'm not pushing Motorola.
And I understand that as far as financing. I would actually be in a position to where I'm questioning Motorola as a sole source provider. That's something I would want to look at. Are there other options out there? We've done a lot historically with Motorola. I get it. But is that the best option to move forward with everything? It very well may be, but I don't want to just assume that someone's a sole source provider and this is the best option, and then we just look to find ways to pay for that. There might be other options, and if we're going to pay, especially something of this magnitude in comparison to other things right now before us, I think we should look at it through multiple lenses. My opinion.
So, and I respect where you're coming from, Mr. Bush, but you want to have your say, but then you don't want to have your say and wait until January when you won't have a say. And so I'm hearing that you're a no. I don't want to go much further into the weeds on this because now we're starting to get into a back and forth about financing and options. And he's just asking, will a date next week work? And I know you said no. Ms. Bender, what do you think?
I just can't do Tuesday. That is the 14th, correct?
Yes. And the 15th is the only bad day because I have shop with the sheriff.
So Monday? Would that, and so gentlemen on my right, I think you both said yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Would Monday,
Yes, ma'am.
is there a certain time that works for everyone better than another?
Just have one thing, Mr. Miller, if we can get Mrs. Hahn, obviously, and Davenport to be there as well. I have the same question. I mean, do we have to put this thing out to bid, or can it be a sole source bid? So, I have a lot of questions, but the date, yes. Let's just go ahead and get the work session going. And we'll go from there.
So if Davenport can't make it though, are you comfortable just hearing about this? Because we know we are going to ask them to come to another meeting for everything else, right?
If they can.
Yeah,
Yes.
he'll put it out, but is that a deal breaker, yes or no? Okay. Yes, so Monday, the 14th?
13th.
I'm sorry, Monday is the 13th. Yes, thank you. Monday the 13th.
So, Madam Chair, I will be out of town on Monday. I will not be returning till Tuesday. So,
Okay,
again, I will defer to the will of the board.
okay. Time preference, 6 o'clock?
It's not me.
Does that work? Yes? All right, so Mr. Miller, could you advertise a work session of the Board of Supervisors for Monday at 6 o'clock at a location to be determined?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Sheriff Giles,
Thank you.
for coming out, and thanks for your patience.
Very much appreciated. Thank you.
All right, report of the county attorney. Ms. Lackey, do you have anything you wish to report?
I do. I have two brief items. The first is that at the beginning of the meeting, I was tasked with looking at the golf cart ordinance. And just a quick clarification, I've been informed that the golf cart ordinance does not need to go for the planning commission. So I'll be happy to look at that markup and bring a recommendation back to the board, but it does not need to go to the planning commission. The second item, I wanted to mention the first public hearing item tonight. It's listed as creation and/or membership in the Rappahannock Regional Industrial Facilities Authority. Fredericksburg did a first reading of their ordinance on the 23rd, and they surprised us a little bit by referring to it as the Fredericksburg Regional RIFA. So that is something that I just wanted to flag for the board's consideration. The statute does require that any member localities agree on a name. So once again, the action before the board tonight is just a first reading. And I just flag that for any board discussion in that regard.
Thank you, Ms. Lackey. Any questions from members for the county attorney? No? Okay. We will go ahead and move on then to board, commission, agency reports and public hearings. So as Ms. Lackey stated, the first public hearing, the King George County Board of Supervisors will now hold a public hearing that has been properly advertised to receive public input regarding the creation and/or membership in the Rappahannock Regional Industrial Facilities Authority, RIFA. I will first ask for the staff report. I will then open the floor for public comment. Public comment is limited to 3 minutes per speaker in order to afford everyone an opportunity to speak. Please state your name and address before you comment. Upon completion of public comment, I will bring the matter back to the board for consideration. The board may or may not take action tonight depending on information received during public comment. So Mr. Miller, will it be Mr. Minor presenting the staff report this evening?
Yes, and I'll just make a brief intro, but we talked about this as part of one of my county administrator's report a couple meetings ago, where Nick has been working with the folks on this for some time. I believe Mr. Britton reviewed it. I think that what Ms. Lackey is talking about is that in the process of us presenting to you and you all being satisfied with it, I believe that then Fredericksburg called it the Fredericksburg facility thing. So I don't know that that's a deal breaker, but I think it's something that we would just want to convey back to them that needs to change. This does require 2 readings. So as Ms. Lackey indicated, that I guess you could make a change on and direct us to then get back with them, and it would then come back for the second reading as changed. But Nick, do you want to go ahead and just give them an overview again of this?
Yes, sir. I'm gonna have Mr. Dines bring up my presentation. One second. This the co.kinggeorge one, not that one, not the EDA.org. Chris, it's in minor at co.kinggeorge.state.va.us. There you go. See it? Yep. So thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. I'm just going to provide you guys with a quick overview of the Regional Industrial Facility Authority. You have my, thank you, Chris. So first, just go over the ordinance really quick. So created in Virginia, the Regional Industrial Facilities Act, Chapter 64, Title 15.2, Code of Virginia in 1997, created by concurrent ordinances to be filed with the Secretary of the Commonwealth. Generally, 2 members from each member locality serving 4-year terms, which may be staggered. The REFA is created by 2 or more localities, at least 2 of which need to be counties or cities, to collaborate on development of regional industrial properties. Localities share the cost and tax revenue using the REFA as administrator or facilitator. The REFAs are used to pursue high-impact economic development projects, or in this case, economic development sites. So background continued. The Fredericksburg Regional Alliance championed this initiative. March of 2020, they received a Go Virginia grant that required 50% match from FRA member localities. That included, in this case, the city, Stafford, and King George County. Still awaiting to hear from Spotsylvania and Caroline County as to what their interest may be. Funds were used to retain experienced legal professionals to establish the authority. Details for a particular cost sharing or revenue sharing framework arrangement is not needed to form the authority. So on November 9th, 2021, the King George County Board of Supervisors made a motion to move forward with adopting the REFA ordinance. And then on November 23rd, the City Council unanimously approved the joining of the REFA on its first reading. The City of Fredericksburg plans to have its second reading once King George or Stafford have considered it. My department recommends that the Board of Supervisors adopt the creation of the REFA ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. Minor. Any questions? Any questions from members? Any questions for Mr. Minor? Okay. Stand by, Mr. Minor, just in case something comes up. So do we have questions for the county attorney?
So Fredericksburg made it the Fredericksburg Regional Industrial Facilities Authority instead of the Rappahannock. What would be the process for an amendment to that? I assume they would need to have another public hearing to resolve that situation. And would they do that before we move forward, or could we go ahead and make an adoption using Rappahannock and then have them join that? Or does that throw monkey wrenches in there?
So on their first reading, they said that they would do a second reading once another jurisdiction moved forward. So I think that we should have some communication with them, but I think that they would not take further action until they knew what King George's position was on participation and name of the entity.
Go ahead, Mr. Granger.
Would we just socialize that with them? Or would that require us to make a motion to approve the ordinance with a different name? What would be the mechanism to facilitate that?
I think if it's the will of the board that the name is a deal-breaking issue, then you could entertain a motion for the name, and we could bring that forward to Fredericksburg and see if they're amenable to a change.
I'll leave it to my colleagues then to weigh in. I see Mr. Bush has his hand up though as well.
Mr. Stonehill?
I'm all in favor of joining it, but not the name. I mean, that's got to be a name that's going to encompass all the counties and towns that are going to be involved in it, not just Fredericksburg. I did notice on their on the reading that they did change it from what we had here. But like I said, however the mechanism that you were talking of, either be a motion saying, yes, we're going to go forward with it, but with a name change, however that needs to be done, let's do that.
Ms. Bender?
I agree with Mr. Stone, especially since Mr. Minor is one of the first people that came up with this idea. And I just feel if we're going to be a regional entry, it shouldn't be named for one of the localities. It should be a regional name, whatever that is. I do take issue with them changing that. That doesn't seem very cooperative.
Mr. Bush?
So I'm of a little different mindset. So we're part of the Fredericksburg Regional Alliance. This is not called the City of Fredericksburg. This is called Fredericksburg Regional, is the way this reads. I believe that, having said that, the city of Fredericksburg doesn't trump King George County. They happened to do a first reading of something that is a partnership. Well, we can do our first reading, and if you are so inclined, we could amend it to say Rappahannock Regional, and then they can decide in their second reading, are they going to change it to meet ours, or are we going to stiffen up against them? I mean, they have nothing that can dictate to this board what we can call it when we do our first reading, so we can still move ahead. But personally, I take no issue with Fredericksburg Regional. I think it is attractive. I mean, we're not Rappahannock either. We're King George. So I have no problem with that, because the main attractor with the industries that we're looking at, there's a lot based in Fredericksburg. The benefit to us joining this is they don't have the land to house anything, which is going to benefit us in our industrial park that we're trying to get populated. So personally, I'm fine with it as it currently reads. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Bush. So the comment I will offer is, while I understand where you're coming from with regard to the name Fredericksburg Regional, and it is the initial office, it says is will be set up in Fredericksburg Regional Alliance. There is precedent for naming these boards and authorities, these regional boards and authorities, Rappahannock. We are members of the Rappahannock Regional Jail Board. We are, I believe our sheriff's deputies get sent to the Rappahannock Regional Criminal Justice Academy. Ms. Bender is on the it's now called Healthy Generations, but it was called Rappahannock Area Agency on Aging, right? We have a Rappahannock Area Community Services Board that serves all of us. So I agree with the rest of my colleagues with regard to, we do our first read, but we say we want this to say Rappahannock Area Regional Industrial Facilities Authority is where I'd come in, and then put the ball back, like you said, back in City of Fredericksburg's court for their second read. And if they want it, they'll play ball. And if not, I guess they'll take their ball and go home. So everyone wants to consider it that way then, the naming? Okay. So we have the staff report. If there aren't any other questions for staff, I will go ahead and open the floor for public comment. Anyone here in the audience wishing to provide public comment for this public hearing, please come forward now. Seeing none, I'll move on to online. Mr. Dines, do we have anyone online who wishes to provide public comment in the public hearing? All right, and members, did anyone receive correspondence, written statements wishing to be read into the record of the public hearing? All right, I will now close the public hearing and bring it back to the board for consideration.
I move for the creation and/or membership in the Rappahannock Regional Industrial Facilities Authority.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
just one clarification. This would just be the first reading. So this would not be the final action on the ordinance.
Do I need to make an amendment to say something along those lines in particular, or was my motion okay?
I think that just a small amendment to the motion that this is to proceed to a second reading on this ordinance.
Okay, then I would like to make an amendment to my motion that this is accepting of the first reading in order to move to the second reading.
Second.
And I'm going to open up for discussion. Can I ask a question, though, of you again, Ms. Lackey? Where it says read, is that literal? Must we read the resolution here aloud during the course of the meeting in order to do so?
Fortunately, no, we do not need to read it because it is lengthy for those of you who've
Thank you.
taken a look.
Thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Bender. You had a discussion point.
Yes, I had a quick question, especially when you mentioned the first reading, Ms. Lackey. So can we, in a second reading, we can ask more questions of it, correct, before voting on it?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion carries. All right, so Ms. Lackey, then you'll follow up with the appropriate parties to inform them of our action tonight and our request. And so we don't right now need to schedule another public hearing until we hear back from the other parties, correct? For the second read.
I think that's wise, given the discrepancy on the name.
Very good. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Minor. All right, second public hearing. The King George County Board of Supervisors will now hold a public hearing that has been properly advertised to receive public input regarding the update of the ordinance allowing designation of private roads in Presidential Lakes subdivision for law enforcement purposes. I will first ask for the staff report. I will then open the floor for public comment. Public comment is limited to 3 minutes per speaker in order to afford everyone an opportunity to speak. Please state your name and address before you comment. Upon completion of public comment, I will bring the matter back to the board for consideration. The board may or may not take action tonight, depending on information received during public comment. All right, and Ms. Lackey, are you presenting this tonight?
I believe Mr. Britton had done what I hope would be a thorough job of presenting this item. I will note that we would need to do a roll call vote should it be put forward.
Mr. Miller, do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, I believe that Mr. Britton had done all the legwork on this and coordinated with the sheriff's office. And I don't believe that there's anything really else to add to it.
And Ms. Lackey, is this one that we have to read the ordinance aloud?
We do not need to read the ordinance in its entirety.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, so I note in the packet, there is the enclosure A, the original ordinance from September 15th, 1992. Also note the correspondence from Presidential Lakes Property Owners Association dated October 26, 2021, to the King George County Sheriff's Office and the County Attorney, Mr. Britton, requesting the review and also the map therein. So are there any questions from members? All right, I'll entertain a motion.
We need to have a public hearing.
Oh, I'm so sorry. My apologies. I did not open the floor for public comment. Let me do that. I will now open the floor for public comment. Ms. Lavelle.
Hi, my name is Ana Maria Lobo. I live in Presidential Lakes, 263. I will appreciate it, and I think I told the last time, I feel very comfortable when the police is in my roads. And I think they already asked you the sign it or something, and I will appreciate it because I feel like the police feel more comfortable they can anytime, especially in the summer. The kids like to be in the lake, midnight sometimes, and I like the police be around. Please, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thanks for stepping forward and speaking. Anyone else here in the audience who wishes to provide public comment during the public hearing? Mr. Dines, do we have anyone online to provide public comment? Members, did anyone receive written correspondence to be read into the record of the public hearing? All right, now I will close the public hearing and entertain a motion.
I move to adopt the update of ordinance allowing designation of private roads in Presidential Lakes subdivision for law enforcement purposes as presented.
Second.
All right, further discussion. Mr. Stonehill, did you have something?
Just one quick little typo, I guess, and it says that is asking the King George County Supervisors to direct the King George County Sheriff's Department to actively patrol, just to make sure that is the office and not the department. That's all.
So Ms. Lackey, could you ensure that in the final version that's how that appears?
Yes, Madam Chair, I'd be happy to.
And Ms. Bender? Mr. Bush?
Something just pinged on me when Mr. Stonehill said Board of Supervisors direct the sheriff's office. So the sheriff is a constitutional officer. He's duly elected. I don't believe this board can direct him to do that. Just something that I pinged on when that was just read.
So I think to clarify where that language came from, Mr. Stonehill is referencing the letter, not the ordinance, right? That's in the letter, not in the ordinance. Yeah, so that would not, yeah, the letter, yeah. So it's clear that it is the sheriff's office and not the sheriff's department. Okay. All right. So anything further? Anyone else? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Oh, I'm sorry. You requested a roll call. Ms. Lackey, did you not?
Yes, please.
All right. Mr. Granger.
Aye.
Mr. Stonehill.
Aye.
Ms. Bender.
Aye.
Mr. Bush.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries unanimously. All right, moving on. Presentations and reports. NSWCDD update presentation. We have Mr. Dale Sisson, newly appointed technical director, here to join us this evening. Thank you for coming out, sir.
Well, Madam Chairwoman, members of the board, thank you for having me here tonight. It's certainly an honor and privilege to have this opportunity to address you. I spent 12 years behind that side of the podium, so first time I've been here on this side in a long time. I just wanted to give you a quick introduction into who I am, the role that I play as a technical director for the Naval Surface Warfare Center Dahlgren Division, and then to kick off our partnership, because this is really what this is about. As a senior civilian at NSWC Dahlgren, it's certainly incumbent upon me to make sure that we are good stewards of all the resources that we're responsible for, and that certainly includes interfacing with all of our localities. And being located here in King George County is certainly very important to us. We appreciate that partnership, and that's important to go forward as we support our mission. I know Cap Copeland's here tonight as well, and is going to address things from in a Naval Support Activity South Potomac side of the house. So the Naval Surface Warfare Center, we're the largest tenant there at Dahlgren on the base. I lead 4,933 government civilian employees, and about 4,000 more contractor employees. It makes up about $1.9 billion a year in a business base. So all of that comes in, and all that goes back out into our communities, whether it's paying for salaries that then feed the tax assessments that you're talking about tonight, or back to our industry partners or academia, and to execute projects and programs. There are no dollars that are congressionally allocated to keep the gates open there at the Naval Surface Warfare Center. We're 100% what's called a working capital fund organization in the federal speak, which means we're tasked to deliver products and execute for programs. And so success is really what drives us. And we're sized to what the Navy needs us to do to deliver those products for warfare systems development and integration. So it's really incumbent upon us to make sure that our warfighters have the latest cutting edge and the technological advantage to ensure that we're never in a fair fight. Second in our business certainly is not an option. And as Mr. Bush pointed out, today being Pearl Harbor Day, very appropriate day to be here. We have a pretty somber mission in the world today with the threats that we face. But it's a very rewarding mission, and one that you'll find if you tour our facilities that you'll see our workforce is extremely charged. I know Ms. Kupka was there last week with me, and the energy that comes off of our organization and off our people is just second to none. So I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to lead them. So I spent 21 years at NSWC Dahlgren earlier in my career. Departing in 2018, I was appointed to the federal government has what's called the Senior Executive Service. So I was appointed to the Senior Executive Service in 2018, became the Navy's executive for weapons safety. So I executed that function for the last 3.5 years at the national level. and then recently appointed to come back and lead this outstanding organization with the Naval Surface Warfare Center at Dahlgren. We're part of a larger corporation, the Research and Development Corporation within the Navy. We call it the Naval Research and Development Establishment. It's made up of multiple warfare centers between the Naval Air Systems Command, Naval Sea Systems Command, folks within what's called NAVWAR. So a much broader community. There are 10 warfare center divisions within the Naval Sea Systems Command, of which we're a part. We're the largest of all of those warfare centers, and we represent the largest federal R&D employer in the Commonwealth of Virginia. So a great responsibility that we have. We actively operate our range on a daily basis for the development and our research, development, test, and evaluation of a multitude of warfare systems. And like I said, we want to be great partners with you on that. I'd invite any of you to reach out, come be glad to host you and help you understand better the key strategic mission that we support. I think there's just no better place than here within King George County to operate the Dahlgren mission, and I'm ecstatic to be the one that gets to lead it. So with that, I'd certainly entertain any questions that you may have. And again, thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Sisson. Questions? Mr. Granger, do you want to start?
I don't have any questions, but Mr. Sisson, thank you for coming out and being patient for us to get through the business. I know you know what it's like to have that as well from this end. So,
I do, and I don't miss it.
very cool. But no questions. Again, thank you and congratulations on being the TD and looking forward to work with you.
Appreciate that.
Mr. Stonehill?
No questions, but just thank you for the presentation. And congratulations on the new role, and hopefully we can all work together for the future.
Yeah, absolutely, we have to.
Ms. Bender?
I'll take you up on that tour because last year when we did the tour, we kind of got interrupted with COVID because we didn't get the whole tour. So I'll take you up on that.
We have mitigations in place, and we're ready to. We're fully up to speed doing business.
Mr. Bush?
Mr. Sisson, thank you for taking time to come out to visit with us this evening, and welcome home, sir. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jeff.
So, Mr. Sisson, again, congratulations on your appointment, and thank you for your patience this evening coming out to share some information with us. And I highly recommend, I did talk to Mr. Sisson ahead of the meeting and said, you got to get with my colleagues. I know you had the chair people there and the mayors there last week, but do some 2x2s because it's a lot of fun. The tour is a lot of fun. You get to see a lot of the hands-on stuff and the innovation, and to see how that intersects, particularly with Mr. Minor's Department of Economic Development, and the STEM initiatives with King George County Schools. It's really great to really see the future right in front of you. So thanks again, and thanks again for your patience.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. And it's my understanding Captain Cook is here, Naval Support Activity South Potomac. Sir, would you like to address the board while you're here, sir?
Good evening. All right. I'm Commander Brian Cook. I'm the new executive officer at Naval Support Activities South Potomac. So I'm Captain Copeland's right-hand man at Dahlgren here. So I just want to have the opportunity to introduce myself. Thank you for having me, Madam Chair and members of the board. So just moved here recently. So family and I are very much enjoying the county, so I appreciate it. I'm a helicopter pilot by trade. Recently coming from Omaha, Nebraska, U.S. Strategic Command, so a little less snow for me is greatly anticipated by the family. That's okay. High school in Virginia Beach, Virginia Tech graduate as well, so very much glad to be back in the Commonwealth. So looking forward to this opportunity. It's an honor to be the executive officer here, kind of working with the county and the base at Dahlgren. I know I've recently met a few of you at the tree lighting, so I really appreciated that opportunity. And I know also the tour with the Warfare Center. So I could even bring your attention that Congressman Whitman was here recently, a couple weeks ago, to tour the 18th Space Control Squadron Detachment, which will soon be the 19th Space Control Squadron. They'll be standing up. So he had a tour there as well, and their commanding officer wanted to express his willingness to give tours as well, because a lot of people, most likely in the county, are unaware that the United States Space Force is even has entities here on base. So it's a good tour as well. But other than that, I just wanted to introduce myself. So thank you again for this opportunity. And I can field any questions that you may have for the base at this time, or you can go through the usual channels with Ms. Jaren Hayes hiding in the back row there.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Granger?
Commander Cook, just thank you for coming out. I feel like we have a very good relationship with the base, with Captain Copeland, before with Commander Lusk, and I look forward to working with you as well. So I anticipate it will continue to be a good relationship. And so thanks for coming out and introducing yourself.
Thank you.
Mr. Stonehill?
Thanks for coming out. Just met you here. Look forward to working with you in the future, and welcome to King George.
Thank you.
Sorry, Ms. Bender?
Yes, thank you for coming out again, and I guess I have 2 tours on my agenda now. Thank you.
Mr. Bush?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commander, welcome to King George County. Thank you for coming out this evening, and I'll try not to hold you being an aviator against you. So that's all I have, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, sir, once again for coming out, and thanks for your patience this evening.
All right, thank you.
Have a good evening. All right. VDOT report by Mr. David Beal, resident engineer, Northern Neck Residency. Welcome, Mr. Beal.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board. It's good to be here. I thought I wasn't going to have to touch the mic since somebody tall went before me, but there it goes. All right, we've been busy. It's been a couple months since I've been before you, and included in my report here is my report for December. I'm going to hit some highlights from October and November as well. We've continued to work on ditching on Millbanks, Stony Point, and Poplar Neck Roads. We've done some tree trimming on various routes, repaired washouts on Salem Church, Poplar Neck, and James Madison Parkway. And we're continuing to grade our gravel roads in advance of the winter season. I was actually out on Big Timber today, and I was impressed with how well it rode. Plan work, ditching on Kings Mill, Big Timber, we ditched there today. We actually got a new toy. It's called a Ditch Pro. It goes on the front of a front end loader, so we can just kind of drive down the road and scoop out the ditch at the same time. So we got about 1,900 feet of ditch done in about 3.5 hours, which is about 2 days work from our previous method. So we're excited about that. It's on loan from Northern Virginia, and we're going to keep it as long as it takes to buy one. So we're also doing some tree trimming, planning tree trimming on Salem Church, cleaning pipes on Caledon, Pine Hill, and Eagles Nest. We've got a drop inlet to repair on Kings Highway, and we're continuing to address work orders countywide. If you remember, 2021 was a difficult year for drainage and storm events, especially unplanned storm events. It's one thing when you know the hurricane's coming, but it's another when you're just expecting a couple inches of rain and you end up with 5 or 10, which happened several times. We lost a slope on 301, which is now all back together and the guardrail is back up. I was there just a few hours ago, and it actually looks very good. We completed that in October. We also completed that pipe job on Jersey Road. Those 2 projects total just under $1 million, which was a heavy lift for the residency, but very important, and we were glad to get those done. The pavement schedule is also complete. This year we put out one of the largest pavement schedules we've had in the state, so it was good to get that wrapped up, and the 2022 schedule has been developed and is out for ad now. On the secondary 6-year plan, we completed Rokeby and Ivy Hill Loop, and we have Rixey and Chestnut Hill Loop teed up, ready to go for next year. We also have the Smart Scale project at 206 and 218 that'll go out to ad in 2022. And we did learn today, if you're tracking the involvement of Smart Scale program from year to year, you remember you have to have what's called a VTrans need. That's the State Transportation Comprehensive Plan. You have to meet a VTrans need in order for your project to screen in to be scored. and the V-Trans needs are updated every 2 years. We did find out today that 2019, needs identified in 2019, as well as needs identified in 2021, both sets of needs are going to allow you to screen projects in for this next round in 2022. So that does affect one of the pre-applications that you all sent in. So we'll work with Ms. Wilson to get that addressed. We have a scour project in 2022 on Pine Hill Creek on 301. That should not affect traffic. I'm sure they'll have a shoulder closure there, but hopefully not a lane closure. All that work is down below the road. So we have a busy schedule teed up for 2022. Of course, the winter is here. We're expecting some hopefully just rain in the morning, and our crews are ready for that. We're actually coming in early tomorrow to make sure we're all ready to go for whatever we're faced with. That's everything I had on my report. Happy to take any questions you all have.
Thank you, Mr. Beal. Questions from members?
Again, I don't have any questions, but thanks for coming out. Thanks for providing the update on what's going on. Really appreciate it. Keeping us appraised.
Mr. Stonehill?
No questions, but just thanks for you and your crew out there.
Thank you.
Ms. Bender?
I wanted to thank you, especially when you actually see issues in, when you took me on Millbank Road and showed me that one part in particular, and we found a stream that you couldn't really see from the road and how something can affect just the ditching. And it was really enlightening. And I really thank you and your staff for showing me, and it makes the public aware that sometimes road issues are not an easy fix. There might be an underlying cause. And that was a stream that went into a field that affects 2 roads intersecting in a ditch. And I thank you for that and your expertise.
Mr. Bush?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Beal, for coming out this evening and presenting to us. I do want to say that, for a long time, it's like King George County was this geographical oddity that VDOT had overlooked. And it's just impressive how over the last, I would say 3 years, it just seems to have upticked in all this attention and things getting done, and you can see it. So I'm really appreciative for all the initiatives that you and your department have taken on and contributed to King George County. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
I don't have any questions. I just want to thank you once again for coming out, Mr. Beal, and wish you happy holidays.
All right. Thanks, you too.
Yep, thank you. All right, action items, Department of Finance, roll-off containers contract. Ms. Pitts, are you here on behalf of Purchasing Office?
Yes.
All right, welcome, ma'am.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. I'm here before you this evening to request that you authorize the county administrator to issue a notice of award and to execute a contract with Waste Equip Manufacturing Company, LLC, for the purchase of 6 40-yard roll-off containers, subject to approval of the agreement as to form by the county attorney. On November 17th, bids were received for this solicitation and compiled into the bid tabulation. The lowest responsive and responsible bid offer that met the specifications we required in the IFB came in at $73,773.00 total for the 6 containers. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Pitts. Any questions? Any questions, Ms. Bender, Mr. Bush?
So that puts us under budget than what we had looked at, right?
Yep.
Awesome.
All right, is there a motion?
I move to authorize the county administrator to issue a notice of award and to execute an agreement with Waste Equip Manufacturing Company, LLC, for the purchase of 6 40-yard roll-off containers, subject to approval of the agreement as to form by the county attorney.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Pitts.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
You too, thank you. All right, next item, Department of Finance, Sedell Brooks Junior Park Picnic Pavilion Project. Welcome, Ms. Turner.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board, Mr. Miller, Ms. Lackey. I'm Angela Turner, the procurement specialist. I'm here today to request award for construction service agreement for Siddell Brooks Junior Park Picnic Pavilion Project. Uh-oh. Sorry. I'll leave it alone. At meetings in October and November, the Board of Supervisors approved funds for new construction of a 60-foot by 30-foot picnic pavilion at Siddell Brooks Junior Park in King George, Virginia. ARP funds in the amount of $40,000 were approved on October 19th, 2021, and previously appropriated funds in the amount of $61,000 were approved as carryover on November 9th, 2021. An additional $30,040 will be transferred from the activity fund balance. On November 23rd, 2021, bids were received and opened for the Siddell Brooks Junior Park Picnic Pavilion Project. The county staff had determined that Virginia Builders, Inc. is a qualified, responsible contractor. We like to authorize the county administrator to take the following actions. Issue a notice of award to Virginia Builders, Inc. in the amount of $115,540. Execute a construction service agreement with Virginia Builders in the amount of $115,540, subject to approval of the county attorney. Establish a project budget for the Siddell Brooks Junior Park Picnic Pavilion Project in the amount of $131,040. Staff also recommend the Board of Supervisors establish a project budget as follows. Construction agreement, $115,540. Concrete footer slab inspections, third party, $2,500. Wiley Wilson, shop drawings inspections, $6,000. Project contingency, $7,000, with a total project budget of $131,040.
Any questions? Mr. Bush, do you have a question, sir?
I don't know if it would be considered a question, so I can wait till discussion, Madam Chair.
Okay, very good. Is there a motion?
I'm going to ask a question, Ms. Lackey.
Sure, go ahead.
So I know there's a couple of different actions here. Is it appropriate to lump them all together, or should we make three separate motions for the removal of this action?
I think we can do a combined action if there's consent to do that.
Okay. Then I move to authorize the county administrator to issue a notice of award to Virginia Builders Incorporated in the amount of $115,540 and to execute a construction service agreement with Virginia Builders Incorporated in the amount of $115,540, subject to approval of the county attorney, and to establish a project budget for the Siddell Brooks Junior Park Picnic Pavilion Project in the amount of $131,040 as presented.
Second.
All right, any further discussion? So I'm going to have Ms. Bender go first since this park is located in her district, Mr. Bush, and then I'll call upon you next.
Anyway.
I just want to say this is a great thing. Going out there several times during the pandemic, the grandparents and parents that went out there with little kids and had to sit in their car because it was too hot or they couldn't be out in the sun. I think it's really important that we give our citizens a place to get out of the sun or have a picnic at that lovely park and go look at the garden and maybe look at it while they're at the pavilion. So I really appreciate it and thank my colleagues for approving this. Well, not yet, but hopefully approve it in a second.
I think we'll get there. Mr. Bush.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I agree with Ms. Bender and can appreciate her sentiments. However, I'm looking at this financially. So with everything that we laid out, for just a construction part of it, the physical building, we're looking at $115,540, but we've only built in a $7,000 contingency. So all I would say is maybe this is something that we need to keep a close eye on, as we've noticed with a lot of previous construction issues that we've done in this county. Change orders come up, and I just want to make sure that this $7,000 is sufficient and that we don't run into a situation where we have to allocate additional funding down the road. That's all I have, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Bush. So, Ms. Turner, the project budget was that developed in consultation with the county engineer?
Yes.
And Mr. Clark, thank you for joining us because the next question was going to be for you, sir. I note an additional $30,040 will be transferred from the activity fund balance. So I then assume, do you have that amount available in your activity fund balance, sir?
As of Friday, December 3rd, Ms. Cobb, our county manager gave me the figure of $410,406.45 in the activity fund. That has all of our winter sport registration revenue in, but we also haven't had winter sports yet, so we haven't expended anything. But we, at the beginning of the year, I think we're sitting at about $350,000. So we definitely have room to use the activity fund rather than put this on the taxpayers' back to go for the additional funding needed.
Okay, with that, any member wish to revisit this? Or can I go ahead and call the vote? Yes? All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Thank you very much, Ms. Turner. Have a good evening.
You too.
All right, County Administrator's Report. Mr. Miller.
Okay, while Mr. Dines pulls that up, I would just two things, and then there'll be some other items. But one is, so the boardroom is available on the 13th at 6 o'clock. So it would be here for the work session. The other thing I would point out is, so Mr. Beal referenced, obviously we are monitoring weather and this is starting to get into the season where we need to do that more. Held a meeting with constitutional officers and a couple key department heads today. Mr. Franklin was from DSS was there, as well as our library director, Robin, and we talked about achieving, I'm waiting for the drum roll, achieving some kind of consensus on closures of county offices. I realize I do not, and I want this emphasized very strongly, do not have anything of any authority over the constitutional officers, made that very clear, and they are very much wanting to have a coordinated approach, and so we are going to be working on that. There'll be decisions made as early as 5:30, 6 o'clock on a KG alert. There'll be one that's sent out. If it's a delay of 2 hours on opening, then that's the one that gets sent out. If we're closing the buildings, and those are the things. We have to obviously work with the different constitutional officers. Mr. Mason, obviously, he cannot necessarily always shut down the building, the court system. But, I thought it was a very good meeting, and we do coordinate with Mr. Beal on what the condition of the roads are. We could coordinate with fire and rescue and a lot of moving parts. But our goal is to have a consensus in terms of what is provided in terms of a office hours during inclement weather. We all, have watched the weather a little bit about tomorrow. I don't think tomorrow is going to be one of those days there would be any kind of a modification to schedules or closures. The item on there, January organizational meeting, so it is scheduled for the 4th. I'm putting that on there to note to you all a couple things. One is holding a meeting with Ms. Lackey and Mr. Britton and Ms. Smith from my office later this week to go over basically the agenda in terms of the procedural parts of it. I guess I'd like to know, is there anything that you're aware of from a non-procedural business need at this point? Otherwise, it would probably be, best that this is a organizational meeting and you're not going to necessarily entertain other issues because of the need to have the procedural aspects of the governing body taken care of at that meeting. So that's what we're planning for. We will put some stuff out to our department heads just to make sure, but our goal would be is that anything would be moved into the second meeting in January. So holiday luncheon again scheduled for next Wednesday, the 15th. and that is at the Citizen Center. And Mr. Clark is going to entertain us, I think. Isn't that right? But we're looking forward to having you there. And so the Planning Commission, I think this was something that came up, and I see Heather is there, and I'm sure she's giving me death eyes right now. But so I think there were some comments that were, that some people had about the whole process of the Berkeley Group's zoning revisions. And so, you know, I obviously was not here when you made the decision to do that, to go on, you know, with the Berkeley Group and to do this process. But I think it was made pretty clear when we had the joint meeting that this was going to be a kind of a lengthy process. And it was, I thought, kind of clear that the Planning Commission was going to do the heavy lifting of this early on and most of the whole process. And there will be adequate opportunity for this board and a future board to be a part of this process. We do need to let the Planning Commission and the Berkeley Group do what they need to do, and then there will be, ultimately, you're the final say. And so I just wanted to make sure that everybody was remembering that this was their first meeting after they had their stakeholder meetings, and they had their other meetings that they had to try to encourage, the survey, to try to encourage input and to receive input. And I realize that some of that may have been not as, you know, we didn't get as much information as maybe they would have liked. There's still going to be avenues for this to be addressed. I just want that to be understood. I mean, because this is a big deal. This is not something that's just a minor revision of a particular zoning amendment or anything like that. This is a major undertaking, and this is going to shape the development and the growth of this community for 10 or more years. And so I think that we clearly, from a staff standpoint, understand we need input, we want input, but we do also want to let the process kind of unfold and then be in a situation where your job is, you know, you're handed that job next, and that's where you're going to get that opportunity to really pick it apart, go in different directions, whatever. Because that's what this is a pretty inclusive process. Ralph Bunch building update. Just to let you know that we are in the process of working with the federal agencies on the financing for that, for the update, or excuse me, for the roof project. We have got the process in place on that. So that's the next real phase for that. If you recall, you all had asked us to do another RFP or to extend that for another 6 months. I do not have any report on that, but I know that that's something that we had decided back in, I believe, October, that we would consider alternative proposals for the Bunch building in terms of its usage. It's also part of the CIP project that you approved, which was a building use study that's going to include the old middle school, the courthouse, and the Bunch building. And so those are all kind of all part of the same process. COVID-19, obviously, I think we had kind of gone into a every 2 weeks meeting, and then when Omicron showed up, we thought that we ought to be meeting on a weekly basis again. Our numbers were tapering off. I don't think they've gone up really significantly. I know Chief Moody reported that there was probably a little bit of an uptick, and that's probably after Thanksgiving. So we'll continue to monitor. It's my understanding that Omicron is not as big of a, it's not as impactful as I think everybody feared. At least that's what Chief Moody was saying. Yeah. So anyway, the next item, I think we have a second slide. So this is Dr. Bush's. So this is the list of the CPMT team. It's my understanding that all of these people need to be basically reaffirmed as members of this team. And so if you want to, make a motion to approve everybody, I know that Dr. Bush had added several. We've had probably like 2 added to this, but this is a list that she submitted to me, and it's my understanding that they need to just be affirmed so that they can continue to serve in this role.
So do I have a motion with regard to this item? And then I'll go back around and ask members if you have any other questions.
I move to reappoint all the members of the CPMT team as presented for the 2022 year.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Ms. Bender?
Madam Chair, I just want to clarify for those in the audience, especially CPMT, what does that stand for?
Okay. Do you, Dr. Bush, Dr. Bush's husband?
I could text my wife, but then it becomes foible because it's taking place during an actual meeting. So
I'm sorry,
I have no idea. Community Policy and Management Team.
Thank you. I just want to make sure. Thank you.
I apologize. I should know that, but I figured it was one of your boards that you guys just appoint. So.
All right, so we have a motion properly seconded. Any further discussion?
And just texted Richard, yes.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion carries. All right, anyone have any questions for Mr. Miller with regard to the rest of his report? Nope. Questions, Ms. Bender? No. Mr. Bush?
I apologize, Madam Chair. I do have 2 things. So you were talking about earlier meeting with departments and constitutional officers on closures. So did that also include the superintendent of schools? Are we looking at, because I know they send the bus drivers out or someone from transportation out early in the morning to look for the feasibility of rolling out school buses. So is that something to where maybe we're not running a duplication of efforts? Or was there any coordination with the superintendent?
We did not include them in this initially. I will reach out. I know that the protocol that has always involved a phone call to know what they're doing, but we don't want to get obviously on the schedule of the schools because we'll be shut down a lot more because because of, so we think that the best thing to do is coordinate with them in terms of the road conditions. And I will talk with Dr. Benson about that or his designee, but we didn't want to have anything driven by what the schools do.
Yeah, I was just talking about the roads.
Yes, sir.
And then the second thing, so Planning Commission, the Berkeley group work on zoning revisions schedule. So I will fall on my sword. So I had some questions after watching the Planning Commission. I had, it seemed like deja vu, like a lot of the things that were being discussed were things that we discussed in our comp plan, but in talking with some colleagues and others, it's part of the process. So I understand why that first meeting was the way it was. The only concern I have, though, is in listening to the Berkeley group present to the Planning Commission, they were talking in senses of percentages. 58% of respondents said X, 42% of respondents said Y, but there was no real understanding of the size of the group. And in talking to some people that went to some of these work groups, it was like maximum 20 people participating. So I want that something to be taken into consideration when you're talking about a jurisdiction that has over 27,000 people living within it. 20 people is not really something to take as concrete. And I understand it's part of a process and working, but when you're talking in terms of 58% of people, well, it's also good to know what the size of that the respondents was. That's all I wanted to point out. And so thank you, Mr. Miller, for your presentation, sir. That's all I have, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair,
Go ahead.
thinking,
Go ahead,
I
Mr. Miller.
believe, if I remember the slide, it was like there was 572 was the surveys that were sent out, that were received. And I just say this, you know, in my career, zoning issues are never an issue until you personally or somebody in their neighborhood personally has been affected by it. And when you guys, when this board, and I know you may not be a part of it, but when this board considers those zoning revisions, you are going to hear from people. You just can count on, and it may not be comprehensive. It will probably be more surgical. It'll probably be more based on, you're going to change the flexibility of wineries or whatever, and somebody's going to show up. So I'm just saying that that's where you'll get those kind of comments. It's a process that no one shows up until they're affected. And that's unfortunate, but that's the way it works.
All right, then. Yeah, well, Mr. Bush, I would just point out the packet did have the numbers of the groups and the number of surveys. And Mr. Miller is right. It was 572 as far as that goes. So I do appreciate what you're saying with regard to the percentage or whatever. You know, it is what it is. Like he said, you're going to.
That was not.
Yeah.
That's to what I was speaking to. It was the group that I was speaking to. Madam Chair,
Go ahead.
Thank you. And I'll only bring this up because I'm not going to be able to speak to this. And I'd like to thank the Planning Commission for the meeting they had, and we'll continue with their involvement on this. It's very important, but you know, you were just talking about going through surgically and that we will hear from people. I'm hoping that this process is to look at actually alleviating some of these overbearing and archaic regulations that we have. It's problematic when somebody wants to build a staircase or a back deck at their house, and they have to basically get an engineer or an attorney just to interpret what we have put in there. And I understand there's state code and certain things that we have to abide by, but there's also things that are self-imposed, and we should make the process a lot easier if someone wants to do something at their home. That's what I hope this work on revising things comes down to, is actually working to the benefit of the citizen and removing some of the roadblocks that we have. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you, Madam Chair, for entertaining me.
All right. Anything else from anyone else? All right. With that, I believe we're due for a motion.
I move that the King George County Board of Supervisors convene in a closed meeting pursuant to VA State Code Section 2.23711A7 for the purpose of consultation or briefing with legal counsel regarding actual litigation where open consultation or briefing would adversely affect the litigating or negotiating posture of the county. State Code Section 2.23711A8 for the purpose of consultation with legal counsel regarding specific legal matters, requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel, namely discussion of the status of the Sedgwick Crossing lawsuit, and Section 2.23711A5 for the discussion concerning a prospective business or industry or the expansion of an existing business or industry where no previous announcements have been made for the businesses or industry's interest in locating or expanding its facility in the community. I invite the county administrator, county attorney, Ms. Heather Hall, Nick Minor, because they are deemed necessary and or their presence will reasonably aid the board in its consideration of the topics to be discussed pursuant to VA Code Section 2.23712F.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Chair votes aye. Motion carries. We are in closed session. All right, do we have a motion?
I move that the King George County Board of Supervisors return to public meeting and certify by vote that only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements by Virginia law and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed meetings were heard, discussed, or considered during the closed meeting.
Second.
Each member so certify?
I so certify.
So certified.
Certify.
Chair so certifies. We are in open session.
I move to adjourn until Monday, December 13th at 6 p.m. in the boardroom.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Chair votes aye. Motion carries. We are adjourned.